Have you ever wondered what your children will do when you can no longer walk? Will they stand by your side or slowly drift away? It's a tough question, but one that many elderly people find themselves asking as they age. As time passes, our relationships with our children change in ways we might not expect, especially when physical health starts to decline. In today's video, we're going to uncover 3 truths about what happens when you can no longer care for yourself and your children's reactions to it. These are truths that many parents only realize when they become physically dependent, and they might surprise you. So, let's dive in and explore what you may experience when you grow old and can no longer walk. Truth number 1, love is often conditional. As we grow older, many of us assume that our children will always be there for us, just as we were there for them when they needed us most. After all, we gave everything we had to raise them, put their needs before our own, and worked hard to ensure they had the best opportunities in life. The idea that our children will continue to care for us as we age seems natural. But the truth is, love and care can sometimes come with conditions that we don't realize until we can no longer walk or care for ourselves. Take the story of John, a 78-year-old man who spent most of his life providing for his children. He worked long hours, sacrificed his own dreams to send his kids to college, and always made sure they had what they needed. Now, as John struggles with limited mobility and the need for constant help, he finds himself feeling like a burden. His once close relationship with his children begins to change. The phone calls have become less frequent, and the visits are shorter. His children, who once relied on him for support, now seem distant, and John can't help but wonder why. For some children, the shift occurs when they realize their parents' needs have become more demanding. What was once a phone call every week or a visit every few months becomes a daily responsibility they're not prepared for. This can be overwhelming, especially for those who have their own families, careers, or obligations. It's a difficult transition for both sides, but for some children, it leads to emotional withdrawal. They may not know how to handle the situation, and some even struggle with feelings of guilt or frustration. The hard truth is that for some, love and care are often tied to convenience. When we are able to take care of ourselves and don't need constant attention, it's easy for relationships to remain strong. But as soon as we require more help, it's not always as simple as offering that care without feeling resentment or stress. This can be especially true if the parent was never emotionally close to the child, or if the child feels burdened by their own life responsibilities. In John's case, his oldest son, who was always the golden child, is now the one who barely reaches out. The son, who lives far away, visits only on holidays, and when he does, it's always brief. Meanwhile, his daughter, who was once distant and rebellious, is the one who checks in daily, makes sure he's comfortable, and handles most of the caregiving. John never expected his daughter to be the one who stayed by his side, but he has come to realize that sometimes the people you expect the least from are the ones who step up when you need it most. But for many elderly people, it's a harsh realization when their children's care is no longer unconditional. The fantasy of being cared for in your old age by your children can often clash with the reality that not every child is equipped emotionally, mentally, or physically to step into that caregiving role. Some may withdraw because they feel overwhelmed, some because they feel trapped by the responsibility, and others simply because the relationship wasn't built on mutual emotional support. John learned this lesson the hard way. Love can be conditional, and it's often more about the practicality of the situation than the deep emotional bonds. His daughter's caregiving isn't driven by obligation, it's driven by a deep, compassionate understanding of his needs and their relationship. Meanwhile, his son's absence is a painful reminder that love isn't always enough to make up for the challenges that come with caring for an aging parent. So, while we may wish for our children to be there for us unconditionally as we age, the reality is that many elderly parents come to understand that love often has its limits. Whether it's physical distance, emotional distance, or the pressures of everyday life, caregiving can sometimes be tied to convenience, and it's not always as simple as returning the love we so freely gave. Truth number 2. Money and inheritance play a bigger role than you think. When we think about our children caring for us in our old age, we often imagine them being motivated by love and a sense of duty. Unfortunately, for many elderly people, money and inheritance end up playing a much bigger role than we care to admit. A surprising number of children only seem to check in when it's time to talk about financial matters, and when the discussion shifts from care to inheritance. Suddenly, the phone rings more often, and visits become more frequent. Take the story of Margaret, a 82-year-old widow who had always been independent and kept in close touch with her 3 children. She never imagined that her children's interest in her well-being would shift when the topic turned to her finances. For years, Margaret had been taking care of herself, but as she grew older and her health started to decline, her children seemed to drift away. They didn't call as often, and when they did, it was always about how she was feeling or what she needed. That was until Margaret's will became a topic of discussion. As soon as her children learned that she had a sizable estate, things changed. Suddenly, they were all eager to come by, offer help, and check in. Margaret was no longer just their mother. She had become the holder of a potential inheritance. For many parents, this is a hard pill to swallow. The attention they receive isn't because of their needs, or because their children want to spend time with them out of love. It's because they want to know what's in the will, or ensure they have a claim to the assets that their parents have spent a lifetime accumulating. It's a painful realization for any parent who thought their children's affection was unconditional, only to discover that financial matters can significantly influence relationships. The tough truth here is that money and inheritance can alter the dynamics of a family, especially as parents age. For children who may not have been as emotionally close, the prospect of receiving an inheritance can lead them to become more attentive. They may show up more frequently, offer help they didn't before, or even begin to make suggestions about how their parents should manage their affairs. All of it driven by the potential for future financial gain. As difficult as this reality is, there are ways parents can prepare themselves both emotionally and financially. First, it's important to set clear boundaries and have honest conversations about finances with children before aging becomes a factor. Having a conversation about expectations regarding inheritance can be uncomfortable, but it can also help clarify any misunderstandings or assumptions. By clearly outlining wishes in legal documents like a will or trust, parents can take steps to ensure that their assets are distributed as they desire, without the pressure of children trying to sway them. Additionally, parents should take steps to protect themselves emotionally. It's essential to recognize that in some cases, children's actions may not be motivated by a genuine desire to help, but rather by their interest in securing their financial future. This realization can help parents navigate interactions with their children without feeling hurt or disappointed by their apparent change in behavior. Margaret, for example, learned to have these difficult conversations with her children making her wishes clear and ensuring that her estate was divided in a way that was fair to everyone. While it didn't completely eliminate the sense of discomfort she felt when her children began showing more interest after learning about her wealth, it did give her peace of mind knowing that she had control over how things would unfold. So while it may be hard to accept, the truth is that money and inheritance often play a much bigger role than we think when it comes to aging and family dynamics. It's important to be prepared emotionally and financially for these realities, so you're not left feeling blindsided by your children's sudden interest when it's too late. Truth number 3, the child you least expect might be the one who stays. When we think about who will care for us in our old age, it's natural to assume that the child who's been the most successful, the most responsible, or the closest to us will be the one to step up. After all, these are the children we've leaned on the most over the years, and it seems only logical they'll continue to be there for us when we need them. But the truth is, it's often the quiet or overlooked child, the one we never expected, that ends up being the most dependable when the time comes. Take the story of Eleanor, a retired school teacher in her late 70s, who always had a strong bond with her oldest son, Michael. He was her golden child, brilliant, successful, and driven. Eleanor assumed that when she became elderly and needed help, Michael would be the one to take charge. But as her health began to decline, she found herself increasingly alone. Michael, who had always been busy with his career and family, was too occupied to offer much support. Phone calls became rare and visits even rarer. Instead, it was Eleanor's youngest daughter, Claire, who had always been quieter, less ambitious, and somewhat overlooked by Eleanor, who became her primary caregiver. Claire had struggled with her own issues in the past. She'd never been the picture of success, and Eleanor had always worried about her future. But when the time came, Claire was the one who put her own life on hold to make sure her mother was well cared for. She visited daily, handled all of the medical appointments, and gave up her job to become Eleanor's full-time caregiver. Eleanor was astounded by Claire's selflessness. This was the child she had never expected to care for her. Yet Claire stepped up without hesitation. The lesson here is that love and care don't always come from the places we expect. We often place our hopes and expectations on the children we feel closest to. But true love and care come from the heart, not from a sense of obligation or a history of being the most successful. Sometimes, the child who seems the least prepared, the one who hasn't proven themselves in the ways we imagine, may be the one who truly understands the meaning of love and family. It's often not the child with the highest status or achievements, but the one who has quietly observed, who has the empathy and the heart to care when the time comes. Eleanor learned this lesson the hard way, but it was a gift. The relationship with her daughter Claire grew stronger, and Claire found a new sense of purpose in caring for her mother. Eleanor came to realize that her daughter's love wasn't dependent on her past successes or her career. It was a love built on a deep, unconditional bond that didn't need to be proven through grand gestures or achievements. This experience taught Eleanor to appreciate the subtle, quiet acts of love, those small, often unnoticed gestures that can mean the most in the long run. It also taught her that sometimes the child who stays isn't the one you expect, but the one who loves you the most in ways you never saw coming. So, as you think about your own future and the relationships you have with your children, remember that true care and love are not about status or expectations. It's about who is there when you need them. And sometimes that person might surprise you. Conclusion.
As we've seen today, growing older often brings unexpected truths about our relationships with our children. Whether it's realizing love can be conditional, the role money plays, or discovering the child you least expect is the one who stays, these are all lessons we learn as time goes on. Remember, true love and care come from the heart, not from expectations. Thank you for watching, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you agree with these truths? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to comment 9 or X if this video resonated with you. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.